Hadirin dipersilakan duduk. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat pagi. Sidang hadirin, kami selaku pengerusi majlis ingin memohon izin ahli-ahli yang berhormat dan hadirin sekalian untuk meneruskan majlis dalam bahasa Inggeris. His Excellency Senator Tan Sri Datuk Sri S.A. Vigneswaran, the President of the Senate, Honorable Senator Datuk Sri Haji Abdul Halim bin Haji Abdul Samad, Deputy President of the Senate, the Honorable Senator George J. Fiore, the Speaker of the Senate of Canada, Honorable Senator Mr. Muhammad Yusmadi bin Muhammad Yusof, Chairman of the Senate Reform Working Committee, Honorable Members of the Senate, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second session of Roundtable discussion on Senate reform.
Ladies and gentlemen, in line with the agenda of institutional reforms, one of the key factors in enhancing parliamentary democracy is to open the parliament to the people. Working forward, the Senate has set up a Senate Reform Working Committee comprised of 14 senators. The committee aims to empower the role of the Senate and its members, strengthen governance, improve the structure of the Senate institution, which includes the composition, tenure, and other necessary aspects, as well as rebranding the Senate institution through various programs including advocacy and public awareness. One of the Senate Reform Working Committee's agenda is to hold a roundtable with the speakers of the State Assembly throughout Malaysia as the main stakeholder of the Malaysian Parliament. The objective is to discuss and exchange views on the roles of the House in their respective states and also share any proposed improvement. And this program, the Roundtable discussion on Senate reform, is part of that initiative.
In the name of the most gracious and merciful Allah, let us seek strength and guidance to make it a success. Therefore, we'd like to call upon Mr. Muthanna bin Sa'ari to recite the prayer. Please welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Most honorable ladies and gentlemen, Al-Fatiha. A'udzubillahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. O Allah, our Lord, the most gracious, the most merciful, we gather today to ask for your mercy and guidance. With your grace, guide us, strengthen our unity, and improve our religion and worldly matters. O Allah, the Lord of all domains, grant us your guidance and counsel. Bless our planning and guide us with your constant wisdom. Lead us to a straight and righteous path that leads to peace and prosperity. Avoid us from all calamities and abominable traits. Save us from disputes that can lead to division and destruction. Bestow us the strength and the capability to develop our country's strategies and policies to achieve excellence and prosperity and our aspired goals. O Allah, most noble of the noble, we ask for your mercy and guidance for our leaders. Strengthen their zeal and determination with patience and dependence on you in carrying the responsibility of developing the nation to be highly regarded, globally recognized and respected under the grace of your mercy. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Thank you to Mr. Musanna for the prayer recitation.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we would like to invite His Excellency Senator Tan Sri Datuk Sri S.A. Vigneswaran, the President of the Senate, to deliver his opening speech.
Saudara dan saudari pengacara majlis yang saya hormati, The Honourable Senator George Furry, QC, the Speaker of the Senate of Canada and Delegation, the Honourable Senator Dato Sri Haji Abdul Halim Abdul Samad, the Deputy President of the Dewan Negara, the Honourable Speakers of the State Assemblies and Deputies, the Honourable Senator Dato Sri Khairuddin, President of Majlis Senator Malaysia, the Honourable Senator Muhammad Yusmadi bin Muhammad Yusof, Chairman of the Senate Reform Working Committee, Dr. Kamis bin Saim, Chief Administrator, Parliament of Malaysia, Sahaji Ridwan bin Rahmat, Secretary of the Senate, the Senate Reform Working Committee members, Honourable Senators, ladies and gentlemen. This event that brings us today makes me happy in a special way since it touches on a subject close to my heart. It is with deep appreciation and gratitude that we are graced with the presence of the Honourable George Furry QC, the Speaker of the Senate of Canada, in today's event. Ladies and gentlemen, please give him a warm welcome. It is a pleasure and a great honor for me to welcome you, sir, to Kuala Lumpur. Indeed, a privilege to not only have the Honourable Speaker in attendance, but also to deliver the keynote address in this momentous event. The Honourable Speaker, advocacy and conviction in the Senate role of being a voice of impartiality, fairness and reason was clearly demonstrated in a statement issued the Prime Minister Justice Trudeau on his appointment as the new Speaker of the Senate of Canada in 2015. The Prime Minister wrote, and I quote, Senator Fury brings a wealth of experience to the upper chamber that will help to restore this proud Canadian institution, allowing it to focus more effectively on the priorities Canadians are facing today. Canadians must have confidence that their democratic institution will respond to their needs. Senator Fury will also preside over the Senate as it undergoes an important change to become a more independent, less partisan chamber. Hence, it is with much enthusiasm that I look forward to hearing thoughts of the Honorable Speaker on how Parliament, especially the Senate, can work better for the Malaysians. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Senators, ladies and gentlemen, we are always reminded of the saying of philosopher George Santayana that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Like all beginnings, it is fine time for looking back and a movement to reflect on the path towards our Senate reform. The opening Malaya's first parliament in 1959, without doubt, was the very crown and climax of our constitution. I would like to reiterate here that the constitution belongs to the people as the fount of power, and Parliament is the guardian of the constitution. Parliament is the shining beacon for democratic process in our country. I'd like to also echo the words of our King, His Majesty, as the paramount leader of the Federation during the opening of First Parliament. His Majesty said that the Constitution of the Federation of Malaya, our Charter of Rights and Liberties, is now finally and completely in operation with the establishment of Parliament, and Malaya had dedicated itself to the principles of parliamentary democracy. Sitting of the Dewan Negara, the Senate, of the First Parliament of the Federation of Malaya on 11th September 1959, the 60th anniversary of the Senate this year, marks a landmark and defining moment in the history of our august House, in the sense that it is a demonstration of our commitment to democracy for the past 60 years. As we recognize the 60th anniversary of our Senate, we also recognize the incredible sacrifice of those who came before us, sacrifice that has afforded us the opportunity to be here today. There is a Chinese proverb which says, "A gem cannot be polished without friction. No man perfected without trials." We know that the commitment of people like ourselves will be essential to polishing this gem of our august House. And like those who came before us, we look forward to a better future, a better reform institution for our children. Mr. Speaker, honorable senators, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is totally unfair to call the senators Atlas Tutus Tiger. It is not far-fetched to presume the negative stereotyping of the Senate, or for that matter, the Parliament itself, was due to the influence of the party-based political strategy. According to a report prepared by Ideas, this has been exacerbated by the observation that in all Malaysian parliamentary history, no member in either chamber has ever rebelled against their party whip. All of this has contributed to the observation that Parliament is a mere rubber stamp. At the same time, we quite often hear our lawmakers at the lower house blunt disregard to the Speaker's order and of unparliamentary behavior, a clear abuse of privilege of immunity they enjoy as a member of Parliament. These acts most of the time goes against every value and ideals which is supposed to be upheld by the elected representative of the people. It is clear disregard to the parliamentary process, honor, and integrity of the august House. The chamber becomes a stage for political theatrical. But on the other hand, like many other aspects of senatorial procedure, we, the senators, it is our shared value and commitment to place our country, democracy, and national interests above all else. Now that after abolishing the Senate, abolishing the Senate would not be in the best interest of Malaysians, and it would deprive Malaysians of what the Reid Commission intended or envisioned the Senate to be. The Commission reported, and I quote, "Our recommendations are made with the intention of enabling the Senate to become an influential forum of debate and discussion, and a body which will contribute valuable revision to legislation and which will be able to impose a measure of delay in exceptional cases." Over the past 60 years, while many calls for the abolishment of the Senate, many also feel that the people would be better served by a reformed Dewan Negara, or the Senate. I do not think we are becoming less relevant. On the contrary, I solemnly believe that Malaysia needs a Senate even more today than at any point in its history. I do concur with Emeritus Professor Dr. Shad Salim Faruqi, who believes the Senate still has tremendous potential. He said, and I quote, "There are about 80 countries in the world that have bicameral legislatures, and these upper house perform various functions despite massive criticism, and they have survived. Although bicameralism emerged first in ancient Greek and Rome, but it's interesting to know the reasons behind the United States Constitution's framers' idea and intention to create a bicameral legislature institution. On May 29, 1787, Virginia delegates Edmund Randolph proposed what became known as Virginia Plan. The plan, written primarily by fellow Virginian James Madison, proposed for a bicameral legislature branch. They wanted a body that operated above the fray of politics. As Edmund Randolph put it in 1787, United States Constitutional Convention, a good Senate would restrain, if possible, the fury of democracy, distancing itself from the usual scenario of petty partisan bickerings of today's lawmakers. Based on many writings, unicameralism has been associated with the risk of potential tyranny of the single assembly, which is prone to political party strategy and short-sightedness. If the Senate disappeared today, which has a distinct role as a dignified, deliberative body, we should fear the shortcomings of a single assembly, which would be solely responsible making legislation in our country. But in absurdity, this is not a process that would lead to good government. If the legislative process failed to serve the riot and national interests, if this scenario takes place, not only we will be altering the DNA of our parliamentary democracy, it will be also against the noble intention of the framers of our Constitution. I'm not sure if it's by chance or by design, but the underlying realities is that in many democracies with a bicameral legislature, the upper house, or commonly known as Senate, have little power to exercise, indirectly making the upper house to be perceived to be less interesting than the lower house. Not only perceived as lacking in legitimacy, but also lacking considerably in inserting the due process in lawmaking. This is an apparent constitutional reality, and under the current form, the Senate cannot do the kind of things many people think or assume it ought to do. I think we are at a critical stage in determining the future development and direction of the Senate. I think and I believe we are beyond the question of to reform or not to reform the Senate. The rightful question to be asked, if the Senate was a failed institution, why others are reforming and strengthening its function? The House of Lords, in the mother of parliaments, has gone through reforms. The Canadian Senate has gone through numerous reforms, especially most significant under the current Prime Minister. In our bicameral Westminster parliamentary system of government, our reform initiatives are not aimed for parliamentary supremacy, but to ensure the Senate live up to its potential or its intended ideals. So the noble intention of reform is clear: to improve and strengthen the Senate to be a proper democratic institution of check and balance. Moreover, since our democratic partisan politics has become stubbornly intense and even possibly getting worse in the near future, reforming and transforming the Senate to be a less partisan chamber, less consumed by partisan vitriol is critical to protect the sanctity of our democracy. Can it be done? Absolutely. As long as we, the members of the dignified Devanagara, are committed to the reform agenda, and is what I'm asking you to do today. So today I stand before you with a real sense of determination, urging you to take as much interest as possible in the reform agenda of the Senate. And I would like to see the change in the attitude of mind of everybody concerned. Together we can make a parliament that works better for Malaysia. If we fail to reform the Senate, we will be failing the very institution which is above our populist politics, an institution with immense potential to make the doctrine of check and balance work for the country to safeguard the interests of the people, but reviewing the legislation in a thorough and substantive way. Meanwhile, in this challenging process, Malaysia's Senate needs international engagement and support more than ever. Many other countries, some whose institutions are much older than ours, have had decades of centuries of more experience. Thanks to a country like Canada, with 150 years of parliamentary democracy experience, especially with the Canadian Senate being strengthened to become a more independent and less partisan chamber, we have a strong case to present to our own government. Mr. Speaker, honorable senators, ladies and gentlemen, in fulfilling the Senate's true potential, in fact, Parliament itself, one Senate reform endeavor that I passionately believe in is to reinstate the Parliamentary Services Act 1963 in order to return the operational independence back to Parliament. My understanding is very simple. Based on the principle of separation of powers, as enshrined in our Constitution, all three branches of government, the executive body, state legislature, and the judiciary, needs to be independent from each other. I strongly urge the government to reinstate the Act, as it is an integral part of reform to ensure that Parliament is a self-governing body without any interference, especially from the Public Service Department and a so-called Parliament Affairs Minister. The irony is that the number of sitting days is determined by the de facto minister in charge of Parliament, not by me, the President of the Devanagara, or by the lower house Speaker. The House of Lords regularly sits for over 100 days per day. Meanwhile, our sittings in a year is less than 30 days. Just to refresh your memory, the Parliament Services Act, which was repealed in 1992, making the Parliament to lose whatever independence it had, was further put to a shameful predicament when in 2005, a proposal to set a Department of Parliament was floated, eventually watered down to the creation of a single administrative post, a dangerous precedent that needs to be stopped at all costs. Therefore, it is time for the Parliamentary Services Act 1963 to be introduced again to ensure the autonomy of the Parliament is preserved and secured. The Parliamentary Services Act will allow Parliament to conduct its own administration, staffing, and financing. Just as the judiciary wants financial independence in management, rather than allowing its annual budgets to be placed under the Prime Minister's department, Parliament should be given the freedom to determine and manage its own budget. I would like to reiterate here again, the Parliament Services Act must be restored as a first measure towards making Parliament administratively and financially independent of the executive. Honorable Speaker, speakers, honorable senators, ladies and gentlemen, before I end, let me declare my interest. I'll be very frank, with more or less than a year to go sitting on the chair of the Speaker of the Senate. Pushing the reform agenda is a legacy that I want to leave behind, not because of my personal glory, but to see the Senate reach its potential and empowered to do what it was meant to do. In lawmaking, you, the senators of this beloved nation of ours, play a pivotal role, more than anyone building a country on democratic values. So the legislation would receive proper, careful consideration before finally becoming law. So once for all, let's send a clear message out that the Senate is essential in any and all matters pertaining to making legislation in this country, period. My honorable senators, at the end of the day, all it matters is getting the work done. Nothing is impossible. In reality, the storm, the magic words binding us together would be determination and passion. Finally, I would like to congratulate all of you here spending a valuable day with us today. And I hope that the opportunity that we have to exchange view over this roundtable meeting will lead us to a stronger determination to do our part in changing the current circumstances of the Senate. Thank you. Have a good and constructive deliberation. So with that, I am pleased to officiate the second session of the Roundtable of the Senate Reform. Thank you.
Thank you to Your Excellency Senator for his speech. Now, we would like to invite the Honorable Senator George J. Fiore, the Speaker of the Senate of Canada, to deliver his keynote address. Please welcome the Honorable Senator.
Mr. President, honorable senators, speakers of the state legislatures, special guests, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you, Mr. President, for that very warm welcome, and I can assure you that coming from the very cold climate of Canada, we're very interested in the warm climate of Malaysia as well. I'm very fortunate to have with me today the Honorable Larry Smith, Leader of the Opposition in the Senate, and the Honorable Marty Deakin, who is a member of the independent group in the Senate from the province of Ontario. As well, I would like to acknowledge our High Commissioner, the Honorable Julia Bentley. Following my remarks, we will open the floor for some questions and comments, but I will warn you that I will only take easy questions. The more difficult questions I'll pass to my colleagues. As Speaker of the Senate of Canada, it is indeed a great honor and privilege for me to be here today, and I thank you for the opportunity to address you. The Senate is one of Canada's foundational political institutions. It lies at the heart of the agreements that gave birth to our country, Canada, just over a century and a half ago. I wish to take this opportunity today to share some perspectives on the Canadian Senate and how it has been evolving over the last several years. I will describe to you how this transformation happened, how it has affected our work as senators, and where we might be going from here. Let me begin by saying that the concept of Senate reform is almost as old as the Senate itself. In 1874, just 7 years after Confederation, the idea that senators should be appointed by the provinces was proposed and debated in the House of Commons. And I should point out that right now, as has been in the past, senators from the date of Confederation were appointed by the Governor-General on a recommendation of the Prime Minister. After a series of major proposals on Senate reform, a recent change has had significant impact on the Senate of Canada. This change is reducing the partisan character of the upper house and making it a more independent, non-affiliated, and deliberative body. What is curious about this change is that it has been achieved by non-constitutional means. For years, proposals to reform the Senate, to make it elected, to limit the mandate, and to change the level of representation of each province and territory went nowhere. Beginning in 2007, the then government of Stephen Harper began efforts to reform the Senate. Prime Minister Harper began with efforts to impose term limits on senators' tenure. At present, senators are appointed to the age of 75. The Harper government wanted to have term limits from 8 to 10 years. And as these efforts were continuously stymied, in early 2013, the former government of Mr. Harper asked the Supreme Court of Canada for an opinion on the constitutional validity of proposals to change the Senate, such as term limits, consultative elections, and even abolition. In April of 2014, the Supreme Court of Canada issued a decision on the Senate reference. It became clear that any substantive reform of the Senate along the lines of those proposals would require a minimum support of 7 out of 10 provinces, representing at least 50% of the Canadian population. The abolition of the Senate would require unanimity. None of this, obviously, was likely to happen. Since then, significant changes have been made by the current government under Prime Minister Trudeau, and in many regards, changes that have helped improve the image of the Senate. These included the implementation of new, nonpartisan, merit-based process for Senate appointments. This change did not require any sort of statutory approval, but was done within the framework of the Prime Minister's office. Essentially what happened, the Prime Minister agreed to recommend for appointment to the Senate the names put forward by the Independent Appointments Commission. This avoided the necessity of any constitutional change or amendment. What added to its impact was the fact that the new appointment process was applied to fill a large number of vacant seats left by the previous government. After the Senate reference of 2014, former Prime Minister Harper announced a moratorium on Senate appointments, which led to 22 vacant seats when Prime Minister Trudeau's government took office in 2015. There is another important factor reinforcing the impact of the large number of appointments. For a few years, the Senate itself was under intense public scrutiny over allegations of inappropriate spending by some of its members. This culminated in a full review of all senators' expenses by the Auditor General of Canada and a fallout from the report issued in 2015. The Senate has taken great strides toward making our institution more open, more transparent, and more accountable to Canadians. Much of this invaluable work was undertaken by the Standing Committee on Internal Economy, Budgets, and Administration, the Senate committee that deals with all financial and administrative matters pertaining to the Senate. The Senate now has an online attendance register as well as an expense disclosure model which provides more information on travel expenses, service contracts, and hospitality expenses. The institution has completely restructured its communications directorate to better engage the public and, most importantly, to provide more robust coverage of the important work done by the Senate and by senators. And starting next week, proceedings inside the Senate chamber will be video broadcast for the first time, making this the first time in our history that Canadians will be able to regularly watch senators at work in the chamber. I guess if they want to go to sleep many days, they'll turn on the Senate channel. Paralleling these changes, a special committee on Senate modernization was created to consider methods to update practices and improve the Senate's capacity to work as a complementary body in Canada's bicameral parliament. The active work of this committee further supports that the senators themselves are fully engaged in the transformation they believe is underway. We have a convergence of events over the past several years that combined have been indeed, for the Senate of Canada, very dramatic. The senators themselves feel it, and indeed the media has taken notice of it. I would now like to outline some of the events and how they have affected our institution. The first phase of the Senate's transition took place after the federal election in 2015 up to June of 2016. During the first 4 months of the 42nd Parliament, there was no government presence in the Senate. There was a group of independent Liberals in the upper house not associated with the Federal Liberal Party or the Federal Liberal government in the lower house. The Senate independent Liberals generally helped with government business in a very informal capacity. But it is worth noting that in the history of the Senate, this was an unprecedented role for a political group that did not participate in caucus with the governing party of the House of Commons. This situation gave rise to a question of privilege, which I ruled against. In some ways, the ruling reminded senators that they had already demonstrated their capacity to be flexible and to adapt in ways to function and to work more effectively. For example, with respect to our question period, the Senate had no leader of the government and no ministers to answer questions from senators. We therefore decided to invite a minister once a week to respond to questions for 30 minutes. This practice has now become widely accepted, and the period of time has been expanded to 40 minutes. The result has been generally a focused exchange between senators and the invited minister on the business of his or her portfolio. In January 2016, the Trudeau government established an independent advisory board on Senate appointments, which was mandated to provide merit-based recommendations on Senate nominations. And when there was a vacancy in any of the provinces or territories, the application process was open to all Canadians. During what was termed a transitional phase, the first 7 Senate vacancies were filled in March of 2016 after broad consultation between the board and the 3 provinces with the greatest number of vacancies. All of these new senators agreed to be independent in that they were not lined with a political party. I will say that all senators, even those aligned with a political party, are independent in the discharge of their duties as parliamentarians. They are free from popular and electoral pressure, and as I said earlier, can serve in the Senate until the mandatory retirement age of 75. In some ways, the appointment of the first 7 senators provided an indication of what might actually happen as this transformation moved forward. It in itself was not enough to challenge the Westminster model that includes the presence of government and an opposition, but it did give rise to tensions in the House. As part of its commitment to an independent, nonpartisan Senate, the government chose to identify one of the new appointees as a government representative rather than the traditional government leader. Senator Peter Harder was named to this position shortly after he was appointed in March. And as he explained to the Senate at the time, He was to be the voice of the government in the Senate and also the voice of the Senate to the government. Shortly after he assumed his responsibility as government representative, 2 other senators were identified by him as a legislative deputy to the government representative in the Senate and a government liaison. The title government liaison was used to distinguish it from the traditional government whip, in that the government now had no mechanism in the Senate to whip any votes. The appointment of these 2 positions prompted a point of order, which led to a decision by me with respect to the actual flexibility of the titles that were being used. In this decision, contrary to normal practice, I chose to elaborate on examples demonstrating the history of this flexibility, and there was a long history of how those titles could be flexible. The benefit of this approach was that it helped to diffuse the force of the debate and the argument and helped to settle the House so we can continue with our normal day-to-day business. The Senate's capacity to be flexible was not limited to this adaptation of titles in leadership positions. A great example of this flexibility was in working out the debate on 3rd reading of Bill C-14, the government's legislation on the very controversial medical-assisted dying bill. An exceptional meeting took place involving all interested senators to discuss how debate on the contentious bill should be structured in the chamber. The result was a special order that allowed for open debate on 3rd reading. Senators could intervene more than once and therefore move targeted amendments as the debate moved along. This is very different from our normal 3rd reading process, but allowed for a very coherent and a very focused debate. It mimicked in some ways the clause-by-clause considerations that take place at Senate committees. This experience turned out to be deeply rewarding for the entire Senate, and we were extremely proud of the quality of the debate for many reasons. There was a very healthy and frank exchange among members that did not depend overtly on partisan identity, but rather reflected the views of the senators who participated in the debate. The debate on the bill was reasoned, it was measured, and extremely personal for many senators. This could perhaps prove to be a model or example of how an independent Senate might behave as an exploratory body when considering legislation and public policy. While the Senate was able to deal with the bill on medically assisted dying in a collaborative and effective way, some tensions in the chamber were still apparent. Committee memberships and substitutions on committees, for example, were issues for senators who did not belong to a recognized party and did not fall under the responsibility of the whip of one of the parties or of the government. Under the current rules, the independent senators with no caucus were in practice excluded from membership on all committees. This was a cause for great tension, as you can imagine. After extensive negotiations and discussions, seats were allocated for independents on each of the standing Senate committees. The presence of those first 7 independent senators has started to shift the dynamic in the chamber, and the shift was enough for a difference to be felt by all. Even as we came up with solutions, there remained other problems that did not allow the tension to fully dissipate. As the Senate's Internal Economy Committee was working on the issue of proactive disclosure, they made a decision that the independents would be identified not as independents, but as non-affiliated in all related documents. This was done without consultation, and of course, the independent senators were quite annoyed. A senator raised a question of privilege, which led to another decision which I tried to mediate relations between the senators affiliated with a caucus and those who identified as independents. I would now like to move on to the second phase of the Senate's transition, which occurred in the fall of 2016. In September 2016, 15 independents had chosen to identify themselves with what was called the Independent Senate Group, or ISG, a group set up in March of that same year. The group is guided by a facilitator, and all members of the ISG have individual autonomy on exercising their parliamentary duties. Yet they understand that ensuring the Senate functions smoothly is a shared and a collective responsibility. The group now is funded. It has a secretariat to support its efforts. The Senate composition changed dramatically in November and December of 2016 when 20 new senators were appointed under the permanent phase of the appointment process, which, as I said earlier, was open to all Canadians, and which, I might add, resulted in the appointments of some outstanding Canadians to the Senate from all walks of life. Many of these new appointees ended up joining the independent Senate group. As the number of independents grew over the years, pressure mounted for further adjustment to more fully and accurately reflect the emergence of the independent senators as a large, and now the largest group in the Senate. This applied in particular to representation on committees. On December 7, 2016, a sessional order regarding committee memberships was moved by the Leader of the Opposition and, with leave, seconded by the government representative, the Senate Liberal Leader, and the ISG Facilitator. This was unprecedented. It demonstrated a general agreement and a clear commitment from all groups to properly accommodate the newly appointed independents. The motion increased the size of the committees and the number of seats for independents to better represent their numbers and established a comprehensive system for committee membership changes. The motion was adopted unanimously and ultimately resulted in renewed memberships that closely reflect the current proportions within the chamber. The third phase of the transition brings us to where we are today, the new reality of the Canadian Senate. Since 2016, there have been 49 appointments to the upper chamber. For the first time in 8 years, the Senate now has a full complement of 105 senators from coast to coast to coast, representing all our nation's diverse talents, backgrounds, and perspectives. The number of ISG members has also risen to 58, meaning the independents now make up the majority of seats in the Senate. Logistically, the increased representation of the various groups in the chamber had a significant change in the planning meetings for each sitting. During these meetings, representatives of the leadership meet to review the daily business of the Senate and share information about which items on the order paper and notice paper are likely to be spoken to and possibly decided. With the changes that have occurred in the Senate, there is a much larger group of people participating in these meetings. In addition to the legislative deputy to the government representative and the deputy leader of the opposition, the deputy leader of the Senate Liberals, and a representative of the independent senators group, all are in attendance along with their staff. You can imagine what that meeting is like every morning. While the senators continue to share information regarding how they anticipate the sitting unfolding, there is a significantly higher level of uncertainty and unpredictability as the discipline imposed through political caucuses diminishes. This adds, of course, to the challenges of the Speaker, as I am often faced with unexpected events that we had no warning or insight into from the morning meetings. I like to refer to them as random acts of independence. In this new period of accommodation, it is interesting to consider what has happened in terms of the legislative agenda at the time of these new appointments. Bill C-29, the government's second budget implementation bill, was an example of openness, sober second thought, and collegiality. The Senate amended the bill to remove controversial provisions dealing with consumer and provincial rights specific to banks. Senators met in a spirit of collaboration with the goal of upholding our country's principles and protecting Canadian consumers. The Senate upheld its constitutional role as a forum for considered reflection and review. It did not allow partisan considerations to overwhelm the Senate's ability to conduct its legislative review. Ultimately, the lower house agreed with the Senate's recommendations. It is very difficult to imagine that such a major change to a budget implementation bill would have occurred in the past. In fact, no such thing has ever happened. Canada's Senate today is not the same Senate I remember when I was first called to serve. It has been an ongoing debate between balancing the deeply held traditions of our chamber and ensuring that our institution reflects a modern-day Parliament of Canada. For example, conservative senators who make up the opposition in the Senate firmly believe that the Westminster parliamentary system is one that includes a government that proposes and an opposition that opposes in both the upper and lower houses. In incorporating a large number of independents into the Senate structure, changes in the way the Senate operates have occurred and will, in all likelihood, eventually require amendments to our procedural rules to ensure that the institution continues to conduct its business effectively. The desire for change and modernization of the Senate is strong among senators, but change, as we all know, is never easy. I can tell you firsthand that tensions have certainly been evident throughout this whole period of transformation. I will say, however, that our chamber has been infused with new energy, new ideas, and ideas that are constantly making our institution a better and more accessible institution for all Canadians. Recent changes to our composition, to our processes, and to the way we conduct business is proof that the Senate can change from within to better reflect the ever-evolving country we as senators are so fortunate to serve. This transition can be defined by openness, by flexibility, adaptability, and a general willingness to move forward slowly without forcing permanent rule change until the landscape is better defined. It is a time of reflection and, on occasion, tension, and it is a fascinating period to be observing and guiding colleagues from the Speaker's chair. I have about another 3 hours of documents to go through with you, but I think what I will do is pass on that. Okay. I think at this stage I'll stop and open the floor to some questions and comments. And I do have some other things we can get on with, but I think I would prefer to hear from you at this stage and see if there's anything I can respond to, or I can call upon my colleagues to assist me in responding. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you to the Honorable Mr. Speaker for the speech.
I've actually got to apologize to my state speakers from the state assemblies because your names were not provided to us, so please apologize for not mentioning the Excellency's name. Thank you.
Now we would like to open the floor for question and answer session.
Hello. Looks like everybody is very consented to the reforms. Questions can be from anybody, please. Member of the opposition from Canada is not allowed. Please, please.
Switch on the. Is it on?
Hello.
Yes.
Salima Gaspari. I think it is very important, as we discuss Senate modernization, to understand from you folks, what was your role as a senator? If you had three things that were important in that role to make your country better. For me, I am a senator because I want to make Canada a better place. How can I make it a better place? How can my associates make it a better place. How can you make it a better place? What is your role as you see it? Could somebody give me some feedback? Give us some feedback so we can start the discussion? Because I think it melds into what our speaker talked to you about, and what we're doing.
Please, no.
Don't be shy.
Okay, can we start
Yeah, anyone?
with the president?
Dr. Harudin, the senior member? Or maybe I can enlighten the audience. The very idea of this reform came when a group of senators, remember we had a discussion yesterday, out of sudden came up with the same indication of interest, which is to do something better in the sense of for the country through Dewan Negara. Then from there, myself, Datuk Sri Khairuddin, Saudara Senator Khairul Izwan, Farahia, my neighbors, Dr. Hasma, these all cross parties. We spoke unofficially, informally. Then in between, the discussion progressed. I think this may be, I would say blessing in disguise, as Tan Sri always mentioned. The blessing in disguise on 9 May, for me, is not very much changing government, for me, at least personally, is an opportunity for everyone to contribute for better Malaysia, or in our words, we call it Malaysia Baru. So for me, I smell the very good intention from my colleague. I'm new, and also many others cross the parties. And we gather among ourselves, and during the meeting, everyone agree, and we elect among ourselves 14 committee members. We call it Senate Reform Working Committees. After we've discussed, generally what we primarily to do, but I think bottom line is about improving and contributing for New Malaysia. And after that, we had a private meeting with the Tan Sri, our presidents, and he gave blessing. So from there, we chart our exercise. And today, I have to thanks to all my colleagues, and especially the support staff from Parliament. Give a big applause to them. And I have to say, somehow our interests correspondingly respond by the local stakeholders, politicians, academicians, and also by the foreign friendly counterparts. Of course, I have to say, be a big hand to Canada. Excellency Julia, to put on record, was so passionate every other day, try to offer assistance. Yeah, so that's why probably today, you see our commitment, Excellency, and our speaker, maybe you have to extend your contribution more. Maybe you can help us, technical and also financial. And to answer you, at least for me, I'm chairing this committee. I learn a lot from my colleagues, seniors, and the new senators. We have only one primary purpose: to improve the Malaysia Baru, through Dewan Negara to our Senate. I think that's at least I can tell you, unless any friend of mine want to further add. What is your intention?
Well, one of our big opportunities in the Canadian Senate is to work on committees. And if we look at the example of the Finance Committee, with major budgets that come through the Parliament, we have the ability to review, make suggestions, modifications in terms of sensitive areas. We have to be careful because our role is not to try to, as a Senate, interfere with the budgetary order of our government. But committees is a tremendous opportunity for each of us to make a contribution. So as you look going forward in your country, our Prime Minister in the election, back before the election in 2014, said the biggest job the Senate can do is a check and balance on the power of the executive branch. Wow. That's very, very important, but how do we, how do you, as you evolve, see your role in that picture? And it's important. Many of you would probably say, well, right now I'm nervous because everything's changing very quickly. We're at an early stage, and I'm hesitant to maybe talk about it. But it's important that you form these groups, and I know you have your committee of 13 or 14 that were appointed. I know you have 2 representatives from each of the 13 states, which is fantastic, in that number of 70 people. But it's critical to be able to start the dialogue, and we're here not to tell you what to do. We're here just to share ideas so that you can pick and choose what you want to make yourselves the type of government that's going to be there for the Malay people and all people within this country.
Thank you.
I would like to add to that. One of the things that allows the Canadian Senate, as an example, to exercise its function as a check and balance on the executive, and indeed it does exercise that on many occasions. One of the things that allows that is our tenure. When we were appointed, as I told you, we were appointed till the age of 75. So whether we vote for a government or against a government, the morning after an election, you're still going to be heard with "Good morning, Senator." You're there till you're 75. Now, I understand your terms are somewhat different. I consider your terms very short. I think you have 2 3-year periods, and I'm not so sure that a lot can be done in such short terms. So I hope you're looking at that as one of the things in terms of the evolution, as you said. And the other thing with the independent process that the Prime Minister is using now, he's taking a very big chance on getting government legislation through the Senate, because the independent senators are not affiliated with his party, and they're not affiliated in any way, shape, or form with his government. Now, to date, most independent senators realize that at the end of the day, the Senate is a complementary chamber. It's not an opposition chamber. We do oppose, as Senator Smith will attest to, the Conservatives will oppose legislation when they think that it can be improved. The Senate in general opposes legislation that it thinks can be improved. We make our recommendations to the House of Commons, and the beauty of the appointment versus the elected process comes in when the House of Commons either accepts some or all of our recommendations or rejects some or all of our recommendations. When they reject them, the Senate generally says, we've had our say, we've tried our best to improve this for the Canadian people, but you are the elected House. You're the House that has to go bang on doors for the next election. You don't want to take our advice? Well, you can live or die by not taking our advice. And that's the beauty of having an independent chamber that can hold the executive to account.
Mr. President.
Before we start on the suggestions, for His Excellency and the Honorable Larry Smith, Malaysia, I think, as far as I know, and I think I might be right, that the lower house has not rejected any of the government bills. With the current situation, the upper house has rejected 2 bills. One by the government senators or the political parties that recommended their members to the Prime Minister and appointed by His Majesty. And they rejected a bill. And this recently, with the new government, with the majority of the opposition in the Senate, they have rejected a bill. But none has ever happened in the lower house. That doesn't mean that the lower house is toothless, or the upper house, it's that they have rejected bills. It's just that it depends on the situations of which the bills are actually given. There were, before we start, my senators coming up with suggestions, on the age limit and the elected process, there was a lot of criticism that a lot of money has been given, paid for these senators. They do not have constituencies, and they are given such a powerful position of rejecting bills or non-contribution in a very effective way. And when I suggested, like the Honorable Speaker said that maybe 6 years is too low, and I suggested that, maybe it must be 5 years. One of the things that was picked up by the media was not about the experience that the senators will go through in the first 3 years, which will be going to waste if they are not given an appointment back as a senator. Where else in your country you've got a commission looking at the appointment of senators recommended to the Prime Minister? Here it is by political parties' recommendation to the Prime Minister, and they've got a quota, each political party, how many they get. So that the issue here is that the appointment itself, it's not independent, and every senators have got to be very careful if they do not follow the party whip's advice by rejecting a bill or supporting a bill, then they might not be given the appointment when they finish in the first 3 years, the first term. So my suggestion to the Senate Reform Committee was that if you want an independent, a very vibrant senator to give his criticism on each and every bill and the demeanor of the government, then he has got to be given at least 5 years. Now, why? When I suggested the 5 years was not to increase or get anybody. It is a very simple thing that 5 years, it's two things that one must understand. When I talk about the benefit of the senators, a lot of criticism, a barrage of criticism actually was towards me saying that we are asking for more money. That was not the reason that I suggested it. I suggested that if you want an independent and a very strong member of the Senate to speak their mind, whether it's good or bad, whether the government want to receive it or not, is if his livelihood is taken care. One of the things that I said that to reduce, if you want to reduce the 6 years to 5 years, because here we've got a law that 5 years they're eligible to pension. Now it was again criticized because why must you give 5 years and you'll be given pension? One of the things, the reason that I suggested was to be independent more, because they can say whatever they want. If they are not appointed the second term, they've got nothing to worry, because at least there will be some gratitude given to them by the service for the 5 years. Unfortunately, it was picked up because I did not have a press conference explaining myself. But this is one of the things that we're looking at this reform. Well, whenever there's a cost involved, obviously the public as well as the government are going to open their eyes and say, listen, we've got a budget constraint and this might not be right. But this is the things that we are facing, which I think the senators from Canada, the Honorable Larry Smith, and the other senators would like to actually give us an idea after we hear from the floor of what they think and what are the questions that we are facing. Can you all start now? Yeah, come. Can you?
Good. Senator, it would be good to introduce yourself.
Can't hear.
Can't hear you.
Okay. Okay. Are you listening?
Okay, better.
Okay. My name is Yaakob. I'm a senator, represent the state of Selangor. One thing that I interested in your country, that your reform was initiated by Prime Minister. The two Prime Ministers you mentioned. I mean, the government initiated the reform for the Senate to make it better country. I want to ask about the appointment of the senator in your country. Is it elected or appointed? Because if elected senator, I think they are more free compared to those who are appointed senator. One more question is that about how to make sure the senators are really independent. Because as my speaker here said that because we are appointed, so we are belong to the political party. So very much inclination to the party agenda.
Okay.
So please.
Well, thank you very much for the question. It's to begin with, the present reforms were undertaken by Prime Minister Trudeau when he was elected in the fall of 2015. The attempts at reform that I referred to under the previous government under Stephen Harper all failed, and they just came to an end with the decision from the Supreme Court of Canada that required constitutional amendments to do some of the changes that he had recommended. So this is all an initiative of what we're going through now is an initiative of the present Prime Minister Trudeau. And how do we ensure the independence? Well, it's really, there's absolutely no way of positively assuring independence. But the fact that somebody goes through an independent appointments process versus, say, what I went through. I was appointed by former Prime Minister Chrétien. Well, when he called me to go to the Senate, I have to tell you, I felt a certain obligation to him that spilled over into how I studied his legislation. I'll be the first to tell you that. But the senators who are coming now, they have no political affiliation. There are no ties to the Prime Minister. They go through an independent commission that recommends them, and then the Prime Minister recommends them on to the Governor General for appointment. So in that sense, they are truly independent, unlike the process that I went through. And in fact, an old political hack like me, I'm not sure I'd get through the Independent Appointments Commission that's been set up now. And I assure you that the quality of the people that are coming to the Senate now, and Senator Smith, who went through the same way that I did, he'll attest to this. The quality of the people that are coming to the Senate now is extraordinary, and they're from all walks of life and all interests in different aspects of Canadian life. Human rights, medicine, law, you name it. I hope that answers your question, does it? Okay. Senator Deakin, would you like to comment on that?
You went through the process.
As an independent?
You can share the experience.
Yes, thank you.
You can introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you. I am Senator Marty Deakin, and just thrilled to be here. And I've been listening for yesterday and today, and I'm going to respond to a little bit about this independence and perhaps a couple of other things to think about. We're just happy here to give you some things to think about, and not, Malaysia is another country that's unique, and I'm overwhelmed by the 60-year political, change that you're dealing with, because you're dealing with change that our speaker spoke to on so many levels, of which the Senate is one. And when we look at this independence, it's actually something I think about a lot, because yes, I came through in this most recent process of selection, and right at the front of it, in the selection process, they talk about, are you independent? Can you display independence? What does that mean? And that was a very big part of my thinking in the decision about whether or not I would actually agree to be nominated or agree to apply to be a senator to help my country, to support my country in the best way possible. And when we are in Senate now, frankly, we are pushing each other with that question all the time, whether in committee or whether we're sitting in Senate looking at specific legislation, and what it means to be transparent, what it means to think about the issue, the legislation, the information at hand, and how it best impacts all of our Canadians, all of Malaysians. And I have to say, holding ourselves accountable to independence and holding each other accountable to independence, to being independent, is very, very important from that perspective.
Can you share with us what kind of question they asked you during the interviews? When you did you apply?
Yes. So okay. Thank you. So in the summer of 2016, the application itself is quite thorough, and the vetting or the diligence or the checking on it is quite thorough. For me, my application went on in August 4th, 2016, and I started in February 2018. So it was a 17-month experience, wait. I want to put that piece up there too that was quite significant in time. And beyond your background, beyond your experiences, beyond what you can provide to the Senate in the way of your skill base, the question on independence does go like a part A, B, or C. Your affiliation, do you have a party affiliation? Have you been a lobbyist or an advocate for a particular political party in the last 3 to 5 years? Those kinds of questions were actually asked in the application process. Having said that, the reality is that in our Senate, independent senators, there are independent senators that have come in and have worked with different political parties. There's no question. But we have to make sure that we're attending to it the very best we can each and every day. So I'm just going to, if there's no more questions about that, I just was listening and a question that my colleague asked to start us off is certainly something I was thinking about around your roles. But the response that came from your chair of the Reform Committee said back to us, we want to improve, we want to make life in Malaysia better through the Senate. And so that statement is something I would assume that all of Senate is working through understanding and using that as your sort of guide for the work you're doing. And so when you're thinking about this very significant change you've already gone into with election and where you want to go as a Senate, that reflection and taking the time on what you think the role that is right now, what you want it to be, is time that you need to talk to each other, first yourself, and talk to each other about, and be able to have some really open, candid conversations on that. How are you going to be able to include the voice, the lives of all Malaysians? We've heard this said, if you want to make Malaysia better through the Senate, how are we going to ensure in the kinds of steps we're taking that we're really able to do that together and better? It's not easy. You're going to have great debates. You're going to have great agreements and disagreements, but how are we going to ensure that we're looking at all of Malaysia in that process? Very ambitious, Mr. President, 1.5 years, what you would like to do, very, very ambitious for sure. You'll have to decide how the reality and how that unfolds, but you're also looking at the idea of terms, how long people are here for, what you can do. What are those 2 or 3 things that you can do now meaning the next while, 2 or 3 months, that help you spin your direction and refine your work? What are those 1, 2, or 3 things? Not 50, not 30, but what are those 1 or 2 things that you can take a look at as a Senate, certainly to make best? And then the committee work that my colleague, Senator Smith, talked about is critical. How can each of you help create those conditions that committees can be an effective part of your work? What do they look like? What is the Senate autonomy in working together? And how do we help build those conditions where you can have courageous conversations, very open and transparent conversations that clearly you're going to need to have. So I'm just going to
I just wanted
there.
to just add to that and note one more point on the independence. Prior to the Independence Appointments Commission, senators were appointed generally, not generally, 99.9% of the time with respect to their political affiliation to the governing party. And as you know, in Canada, there's only been two parties that have ever governed nationally in the 150 years. That's the Progressive Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. Of the 49 appointments since the Independent Appointments Commission has been put in place, only one of those 49 has had any previous political connection. And that individual was a member of a provincial New Democratic Party, which has never governed federally. So only one with any political connection at all or any political affiliation. None of the others have had any known or significant political affiliation.
Mr. President.
Hi.
Senator Azwan?
Yep. Thank you. honorable speakers of the state assemblies, fellow speakers, fellow senators, Your Excellency, Canadian High Com. My name is Azwan. I want to talk about the people, the voters, as we call it in Malaysia, the rakyat. Now, you had your new vision post-October 2015, when Prime Minister Trudeau was really driving for the change. Now, what was the engagement, public engagement that you had? Was there any national conversation towards this Senate reform in Canada? And throughout the reform process, did you gauge with the public sentiments and satisfaction? And if you did, then how was it? And is it a continuous process of public engagement, and you do measure their satisfaction towards the reform that you had? Because in Malaysia, it's a long journey. It's a long marathon.
Yeah.
We're just about to start a new legacy here. So we want to learn more about it, about public engagement from your experience in Canada. Thank you.
I would classify that as one of the difficult questions. So I'm going to pass that over to Senator Smith or Senator Deakin. But before I do, I will say this. The Senate's whole reason for being was really twofold: to represent your regions and to protect minorities. And even prior to this process, this independent process, senators always took their responsibilities in their regions very, very seriously. So senators always represented the Senate at functions, definitely at parties and things that they were invited to. And by parties, I mean party functions. I don't mean good time parties. I mean political party functions, things of that nature. So they did engage with the general public. Senators always took it upon themselves to ensure that they went to schools when they were asked to speak about the Senate, the role of the Senate. And that has continued on even after this independent appointments process. So we do take it very seriously. And as I said in my remarks, we've enhanced and improved considerably our communications directorate in the Senate so that we have more ways of connecting senators and the work that senators do to Canadians. More senators now are using social media. They're on Facebook and Twitter and all of those things. 10 years ago, nobody knew what that was, and if they did know, most of them had no interest in partaking in it or participating in it. So it's become much more open and much more participatory. And it's a very good question because that's part of our role. I'm going to ask Senator Smith or Senator Deakin if they'd like to comment on it as well.
Yeah. Was the formation of the Independent Advisory Board, was it a recommendation by the general public, or you basically just within your circle in the Senate or the government that actually proposed it?
Just go back for a sec to support what our speaker said. In 2012, the government at the time looked at the three, I guess they called them the three E's. One of them was elected Senate versus an appointed Senate. In Alberta, we had 3 to 4 senators that went through the election process to become members. So when you say, how does an elected senator compare to an appointed senator? The truth of the matter is that the people that were elected are outstanding, and the appointed people, because of the process and the improvement in the process, are outstanding candidates. So in going to questions that were raised earlier, if you look at how long does it take you to become a competent senator? For the first year and a half, because I come from business, I wasn't in politics, so I came in later in my life, but for the first year and a half, I didn't really say a lot, because I was trying to learn what was going on. And I would suspect that new people in your group
are going through the same process. And with the amount of change that you're facing, you've got huge change that's coming at people quickly. So when we look at our situation, it was an evolutionary process, but slower. So, question that was brought up earlier by the speaker was that term. The previous government said 8 to 10 years is a term. Why? Because it takes you as a senator a period of time before you can raise to the competency level where you have some degree of comfort and major contribution. Some people are faster than others, but the benefit is meeting senators that have been there longer. They can mentor you and help you. So the elected versus the appointed, the jury is still out. Will that come back one day? Who knows? But it's part of a process. So our process is not just, it's going to happen tomorrow, here it is, here it goes. It's going to take time. So the next thing that you may want to consider, and I know that the speaker was looking at this, is the term. And I understand the pressures of the public looking, say, you're spending taxpayers' money on salaries. But the reality is that if your MPs have a term, one of the things you don't want to do is have the term of your senators be exactly the same as your members of parliament. And that's one question that we did grapple with in Canada by making sure that if we were going to have any form of a term, that we made sure that there was a rollover so that we weren't suddenly losing MPs and senators, boom, at the same time. So something to think about. And something to think about too is how long does it take to have a senator who's going to make a major contribution? How long should it be? Is it 2 times 3 years? Or is it 5 years? Or is it 5 years plus a potential extension? Prime Minister Harper asked me, would you consider staying for 8 years? I told him right off the bat, 8 to 10 years, because it takes time to get up to speed. For the first 2 years, I was looking, then I became Vice Chair of the Finance Committee. 4 years later, I was Chair of the Finance Committee. 3 years later, I was Leader of the Opposition. It takes time to get through the process. It takes time to get through the process. So define what time you want to use and then sell it to the public, because it's going to be the quality of what you do.
Thank you, thank you. To respond to your question about the public and consulting with the public, I believe that was part of your question. And absolutely, in a way, that's how I became even more involved in this. And that in 2013 and 14 in Canada, there was perhaps a negative perception or a misunderstanding of Senate. So what is happening? There was some information that the speaker spoke about earlier that didn't have the Senate in a highly respected, or as high as it could be respected, role for Canadians, first of all. And then the piece around relevance. What does it mean now in 2013, 14, and 15? And so there were a number of pieces, and the Prime Minister's work to carry on was absolutely, we need to make sure that Canadians have a better understanding where the Senate fits, that we know where it fits, that it becomes relevant. And one of the outreaches that we have that the speakers referred to was something called Cengage. So part of the strategy as senators, we are engaging with the community, schools. I will spend time with community groups wherever I can, like any other senator. And just on my desk here, our tabletop, which I'll leave with you, are samples of some of our engagement packages. What have we been able to do with our schools? How do we explain to Canada that the Senate is a chamber of thought and action? What kind of resources out there? So we're telling our story as we're growing as a Senate and trying to work on that continuous improvement for all Canadians each and every day. And this week, 2019, we're looking at a opinion, we'll call it a poll, that's going out with 7 questions saying to Canadians, so how are we doing? What do you know about Senate now? So that piece is important as part of our own continuous improvement and transparency with Canadians.
If I may just interject. Senator Larry Smith just said that we are looking at the how many years, the years of the senator. One of the perception, that I must say perception, because the reason why I'm stressing that it must be more than 3 years is because the perception is that it was systematically designed that the senators must have 3 years and they are not supposed to be vocal. If you are vocal, you will not be given an extension. So this is, if you're looking at Malaysia Baru, then this must be amended. Because this perception by the previous government and the government now is, if you do not want to think about extending and giving the independence to the senators to be more vocal, then you are restricting their voice by giving them 3 years, behave yourself, and we give you a pension after the second term. Now, you can say any which way you take it, but if you really want to think about being vocal, and the government is very serious of bringing the best to the public, bringing the best, that it must be a stopgap measure in laws that has been passed through by the lower house. It's supposed to be a second best revising chamber. Then the senators have got to be vocal. And this is the reason that I've said it, but today I've got to explicitly say that your 3 years is so that you don't misbehave. Please, carry on.
Mr. President, my name is Sharifuddin from Institute Darayasan, a Socio-Political Research Institute. Somehow, some of my question has been answered by the Honorable Senator just now. But anyway, Canada has a constitution where has remained intact that members of the Senate is to be appointed rather than elected. But history has shown that I think Alberta has begun something in some time ago, where they tried to do an election to elect members to the Senate. But somehow it has not been a binding election. The Prime Minister is still at his liberty whether or not to appoint those people elected through the elections. We have seen Mulroney and Harper's appointing some of them, but somehow there are sentiments among the political parties that feel that election is not the way in putting people in the Senate. I was told that the left-wing parties even boycotted the election for some of those who attempted to elect the senators to the Senate. What is actually the sentiment of this resistance towards electing senators to the Senate, where it culminated in the decision by the court that outlawed this particular election of senators to the Senate? What are really the sentiments of the people, of the political parties that go against, attempt to use election as a method in putting people in the Senate? This is why I'm asking this is that I think is the current sentiment that people are wishing that those are being put in the legislature must be people that being chosen by the people rather than being appointed by anybody. But somehow, even the political parties themselves seems to be resisting this attempt in Canada, which finally is ended with the court deciding that it is against the law to hold an election for the senators. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and you're right to point to Alberta. Over the years, Alberta has always promoted a Senate that was, as Senator Smith said, a Triple E Senate, elected, effective, and efficient. And indeed, the provincial government, or state government, as you would call it in Alberta, has gone through the process of electing senators, what they would call senators in waiting. Prime Minister Mulroney, in fact, appointed, I think, one of those, and Prime Minister Harper appointed 2, maybe 3, but 2 for sure, over the term of his tenure. there is no real common consensus or no consensus between all of the provinces as to whether or not they should elect. There's always a debate about whether appointed is really democratic. And the pros say, well, you know, the appointments are made by democratically elected prime ministers, so it's not really a question of whether or not it's an insult or an affront to democracy. We have a judiciary that's appointed. Nobody calls that an affront to democracy. You know, our neighbors to the south elect some of their judiciary, but in Canada we're all appointed, but nobody considers that an affront to democracy. So those arguments have been going on for a long time. But to answer your question specifically, there is no consensus across the country. The real movement for elected senators has always been solely in Alberta. It's never really spread to the western provinces. You don't hear much talk about it in British Columbia or Saskatchewan or Manitoba. You certainly never hear any talk about it where I come from, on the eastern side of the country, in the Atlantic provinces. And Ontario has never expressed any real strong sentiment about electing versus appointing. Quebec is a little different in that in Quebec you're not appointed as a Quebec senator. Quebec is divided into political regions, and you're elected from a region. All other senators in all other provinces and the territories, the 3 territories, are elected to represent the whole province and the whole territory. But I have never heard anything coming out of Quebec that would support an elected Senate. It really has been, in the past, an Alberta issue, and continues to be to this day. But a very good question. Thank you.
Honorable Senators.
If I just may add, to His Excellency the Speaker. Hypothetically, I can say, because I'm not going to share the experience of Alberta or Quebec. No, the hypothetical thing is, they have got a system where the independence of the senators' appointments is in place, where you can get the cream of the society to be represented in the Senate. Politically, nobody wants to give up this right. They've got a lot of appointments to be made. They've got people who worked in the parties, and they want them to be actually in place where they can give the voice of the party or the state concerned. So, obviously, here it should be welcome more of the appointments, because then we can put intellectuals. We can put people representing a division of people where their experience, like the Senate we've got retired armed forces, we've got retired lecturers, we've got professors, we've got doctors. You can appoint people in that respective professions. Now, this is the reason for the establishment of the Senate by our forefathers, that to put people who can represent when they are not elected from the masses, they cannot be elected from the masses, intellectuals, experience that could be shared, and their experience will benefit the country in giving their input before a bill is passed. Now, this is the reason, more so, like the question just was brought up, why I think, presumably, that people would have rejected the election, because you cannot get, in elections, it's only politicians who get elected, not intellectuals generally, but unless they are in politics. And if they are in politics, then it defeats the purpose of having an independent Senate in the first place. Thank you.
Sir, can I have one question?
I think Ismail,
Sir.
Datu Ismail, then we go Faria, and then our senior Senator Nga wants to have a word. Do we have to?
Actually, we're running out of time.
Oh. Can we just?
Can we have the last one?
Can I have
no, they've
one
got
last
3
one?
of them. Can we just continue these 3 people?
Okay, this is a president request.
No, because now you all must blame the opposition member from Canada, Larry Smith, who's been telling speak, speak, speak. Now everybody wants to speak. Carry on.
Thank you.
Ismail, then we'll go to
Thank you,
the Honorable Faria, and then my learned friend, the Honorable
I think from
Nga.
state. One question from
Oh, he wants to ask. Oh, please.
Can
we give him?
I think maybe from state.
Can we give the speaker?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm Sohaizan from speaker in Johor. Yeah. In Malaysia, we have three different government. First, the federal. Second is state, and the third is the local council. Yeah. In the state government, we don't have any senate. Don't have any senate. Yeah? Is it possible in the state level we have a concept of senate concept in the state government, in the state level?
There was historically actually our provinces were bicameral, Quebec up till just recently, but there are no bicameral legislatures in any of our provinces now.
Just to add on to the speaker's request, we are now having problem surviving. So I don't think establish one. Yeah, Muhammad, the Honorable Ismail.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nasri. The Honorable Josh. Listening to your keynotes, and my name is Ismail. I'm one of the members of the Reform Committee. I have to be very sincere in this meeting. Going through the last few months, going through the literature, a lot of discussion, debate, and discourse, and listening to your keynotes, I have to confess, we have a long journey to go. It's not an easy process. It's not an easy process. But anyhow, we have to be realistic also. I have to inform the floor today. Next year, probably, if I can mention our speaker from Sarawak is here, Dato' Afia, probably the Sarawak state election will be held. And once after the state election, based on the previous experience, people don't talk about reform anymore. Everybody will talk about election. Yeah. So I keep on reminding the committee and in all discussion that we have to be realistic in what we want to achieve. The biggest stumbling block is the abolishment of PSC, the Parliamentary Service Act 1963, in 1992. Now, I don't know what's the discussion at what's going to happen in this April assembly going on, whether the present government is going to revive the PSC 1963. That is very important. In fact, in Tan Sri, Speaker of the Senate, just now you also mentioned about the importance of for us to revive again the 1963 Parliamentary Service Act. Now, very quickly, to be realistic for the committee, because at the end of the workshop today and the next 3 days for the committee, we have set up our term of reference for us to achieve. And the very fundamental 3 or term of reference that we have set is, number 1 is to define the role and power of the Senate. Number 2, the composition members of the Senate. And finally, number 3, the appointment process. Now, what I think I would like to, if the Honorable Josh, Speaker, can share with us, I'm really touched when you talk about the Independent Advisory Board for Senate appointment. I think we have, the committee have not looked into that seriously, so if you can just elaborate a little bit more on that, because to me, that is very important. Thank you.
Okay.
Very good last question.
No.
Yeah?
After
Another one?
and then
Oh,
Do you want me to take all three of them together?
All right. Why not? Then you wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Parliament, as you know, in our Westminster system of government, Parliament is supreme. I'm somewhat surprised to hear that you have no parliamentary services. That it was abolished. Yeah, that to me is quite remarkable. I mean, you know, Parliament. It is a necessary adjunct to Parliament to have parliamentary services, and if you're going to do anything, reinstate that. Anyway, sorry. The next question.
Yeah, Honorable Excellencies, I'm going to very quick questions. In 1995, Canada has adopted the Federal Plan for Gender Equality. That is in response to the Beijing declarations on the CEDAW. And in fact, Canada was one among the first country has rectified and signed the declarations. My question is, what are the women representations in your Senate? And how do you ensure that the plan that you have adopted, the adoptions of the plan, are well implemented in your Senate reform? To ensure, because you only have about 27% of women in your House of Commons. So do you have any, in order for you to reform your Senate, to make it balanced, in order for you to achieve the 30% in the CEDAW? Thank you.
Very good question, and thank you very much for it. As you know, Prime Minister Trudeau is a self-professed feminist, and he when he formed his first cabinet, ensured that he had gender balance in that cabinet, which was a first in the history of our country. In the Senate, one of the things that the Independent Appointments Commission takes into consideration, among many others, is gender equality. And if you look at the number of women in the Senate now compared to 10 years ago, we're creeping up on 50% in the Senate, which is extraordinary. So it is an issue, and it is something of concern to us.
That's very
well,
good.
look, I want to just again thank you. Oh, sorry, you have another question?
No, sorry, I'm just saying that you have 50%. We are in Malaysia, we only have 19%, which is so far away from the 30% even.
Yeah, well, when I come back in a couple of years, it'll be different.
Mr. Speaker, my name is Nga Hock Chair from Sitiawan. The Malaysian Senate has undergone some amputative, if not truncative surgery, whereby the number of appointed senators was increased from 16 to 22, then 32, finally to 40, with another 4 for the federal territories appointed by the King. The question I want to ask is whether, what would be the best appointee process to adopt to fortify the independence of the Senate? And secondly, whether the members of the Canadian Senate and the House of Representatives enjoy equality in remuneration. Thank you.
I think you've touched on one of the issues that are going to be very controversial and very difficult to grapple with. I have no doubt about that. But look, I've just been asked to wind up. I want to just take a minute to thank you very much and repeat what an honor and a privilege it is for myself and my colleagues to be here with you today. And thank you for inviting us to be part of this very important and very courageous effort that you're making to reform your Senate. I can only wish you all the very best, and please, at any time, if you think that we can be of any assistance, reach out to us. I hope to see a delegation of your senators come to Canada to see how our Senate works. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker and Senators, Parliament of Canada. Now, we would like to invite all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, together at the stage for photograph session.